Meow. Yeah.
Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It's time for another Oscar retrospective. We're diving deep into a year from the past. This time, that blast is coming from the 2011 Oscars, featuring the 2010 movies. The King's Speech versus The Social Network legendary battle. I love you.
Can your love be powerful enough to stick a stay?
It's for your own good.
Settle down. Don't be fussy.
This way we can still see you when I put the title cards on the bottom.
Oh, shush you away, baby.
Little cream puff. Look at you, your beautiful white coat.
Come on, cookies and cream. There you go. Settle down. So I watched both of these movies yesterday. I've already seen both of them, but I watched them again. Having watched both the movies, Social Network is great. But The King's Speech is so charming. It makes you feel so good, and it's hard to say anything bad about The King's Speech. It's one of those movies that after you watch it, you're like, this can win Best Picture, because you walk out of it and you're like, performances were great. Colin Firth needs an Oscar now. Jeffrey Rush should win Best Supporting Actor, though we'll get to that, why he didn't win. Art direction, fantastic. Even the direction. It wasn't just like Imitation Game Green Book stuff where it's just, nothing, there's no style at all. It actually did have, some innovative style, and it had a really cool look to it. It was really moving by the end of it, and it was so charming. The writing is like very sharp, very witty. It's an awards juggernaut. Like there's no way around it. But
there's nothing you can do.
It's a safe movie.
Classic Oscar bait. Period.
Yeah. Overcoming difficulties,
friendship.
Then you have The Social Network. The Social Network has it all too. But does The Social Network make you feel good? No, it does not make you feel good.
It's not a slow burn Roma thing.
No, The Social Network is very fast-paced. It's very entertaining. But by the end, it's Zuckerberg alone in a room. It's really brilliant, but it doesn't make you feel good. The Social Network, there is a lot to marinate on. It explores the new wave of tech giants and that cutthroat race to the top, and sort of explores these personalities of these geniuses, these genius nerds. And it says something about human nature and the way that these future tech giants are doing the same thing that we've always done throughout history. They're just trying to figure out how to elevate their own status.
We use technology to solve the same problems that we've always had, but in doing so, we run into the same exact problems, just in different forms. And that's why it's the kind of movie that ends up on a Best of the Decade list. The King's Speech just isn't the movie that ends up on a Best of the Decade list. So what happened here, pretty clearly was the Academy was high off the endorphins from The King's Speech. This has happened before. Crash was a movie that went for the emotions harder. Green Book went for the emotions harder. Meanwhile, their competitors, Brokeback Mountain and Roma, those are decade best movies. They end up on people's lists. It's a tale-old time. It's an age-old story.
It didn't happen with Moonlight, though. I would say, Moonlight is not a feel-good
That's
movie.
true.
La La Land gives you more of a high. I was pondering this myself because honestly, for how much I like both of the movies, I feel a little similar in a way. I really like them both in different ways, but I want to see more movies like The Social Network rather than The King's Speech. I want more movies to take risks because I find those risks entertaining, and I like when filmmakers are trying to do something where there could be a big payoff. They're exploring territory in film that hasn't been done before. And The King's Speech doesn't do that. I might be rooting for The Social Network over The King's Speech, not because I liked it more or because it tickled me in a better way, but because it represents something if it wins. It's part of an agenda that people Letterboxd community, film criticism people kind of have about giving Best Picture winners to films that have a lasting impact rather than what makes you feel good in the moment. Even though the general audience might enjoy King's Speech more. It has a higher IMDb score. I think the whole race kind of speaks to that. We want the Oscars to be furthering cinema.
I think that The King's Speech reputation has been degraded by it beating The Social Network, but I think, credit needs to be given to The King's Speech for being, as good as it is. I agree that I want to see the riskier films win, but King's Speech deserves credit in some ways.
But The Social Network's more of a movie I would watch that again. If I had to choose which one I would watch again, I'd obviously watch The Social Network. The Social Network from sort of the beginning, from the announcement, was poised to be the film to beat just by like the status. When it came out, it had amazing reviews. So people were like, this just confirms, early speculation that this movie is our Best Picture winner. Then The King's Speech came out at Toronto, wins the award. So you're going, uh-oh, whoopsie-dozy. So it's big business. And from then on, I believe it was King's Speech versus Social Network. I don't think people were caught on to the fact that King's Speech was going to win until probably PGA gave it Best Picture. And people were also had this idea that Fincher was finally going to win his director Oscar, which is a big reason why Social Network was supposed to win Best Picture, because it was sort of his best, most critically acclaimed film.
The Social Network gets Critics' Choice Golden Globe, and then King's Speech gets PGA and BAFTA. So you can see that Social Network had an early rise. The Critics' Choice, obviously, the Golden Globes.
And definitely winning all the critics' circles.
Sometimes it feels like movies run out of steam. Boyhood was winning everything, and then it lost something, and it kind of switched around. Like, we do see this where movies lose steam in their Best Picture run. Maybe even La La Land, you could say that. 1917, like at the very end.
Yeah, it's very possible movies can lose steam by the time the Oscars roll around, yeah.
So what other contenders do we have? Black Swan, which is, maybe my favorite out of this whole list. Aronofsky broke into the Oscar race. We love to see it. We love when that happens, like how Wes Anderson broke in with Budapest Hotel, like, Lanthimos, whatever, what have it. Like, this was Aronofsky. This was Aronofsky breaking into the Oscar race. The Wrestler probably would have been there if there were 10. It was also kind of an interesting movie because it was a little bit of a genre defier. It had the pleasures of Oscar bait in some ways, but then it's also a little bit of a horror movie.
Of Oscar bait?
Cinema shit. Everybody fucking loved it.
Oscar bait?
And it was like, oh my god, Toronto, like standing ovations and shit. Like, people loved Black Swan.
I guess, but I don't know. It doesn't...
And
it's not Oscar bait at all.
It also made so much money.
Yeah.
So much money for what it was.
Yeah.
We had Inception, which is easily like one of the best action movies of the decade. I watched this movie when I was 14, and I hadn't seen it since. So, 14-year-olds love Nolan. And then watching it again later, I still had a really great appreciation for what Nolan did with Inception. I mean, that movie still feels very singular. Like,
I also rewatched Inception, and I really like that film. I mean... I give it like a lot of credit. It's just a fascinating, fucking highly entertaining movie.
Obviously, it was an early release, but for a time it was thought maybe this can win Best Picture.
Well, after it came out in the summer, yeah.
Yeah,
People
like there were no
this
festivals.
Is a film to beat. But of course, that always happens with like Stars Born Hollywood and even Dunkirk. It's the film to beat, but it can easily be beaten.
We had The Fighter and True Grit, which were two movies that skipped fall festivals, but then came out afterwards. And The Fighter quickly elevated its status to an Oscar movie where it wasn't necessarily expected because David O. Russell hadn't broken out like that before. We have True Grit, which was big Oscar bait Coen's movie. Probably like one of their safer movies, I guess you could say. Like, I wouldn't say it's like one of their very best or anything. It was definitely a movie that made sense to give it like a ton of nominations. We have 127 Hours, just an example of a movie that is about something like fairly simple, but does everything better than it should. I love 127 Hours. It's definitely one of my favorite nominees here. Toy Story 3.
Oh, so you had two summer movies here.
And obviously being animated, like, there's not many animated movies that do that. But obviously Toy Story 3 made everyone cry, so what are you going to do about that? Kids Are All Right and Winter's Bone were both Sundance films that managed to last their hype all the way to the end of the year. And I just watched Kids Are All Right, and I loved it. I loved Kids Are All Right. It was a great movie. It was very highly entertaining. It had amazing performances and writing. It feels like it definitely makes sense to be in a Best Picture lineup. Winter's Bone, on the other hand, after watching that, I was like surprised that this made it in because this is not baity. Like, I get that you can nominate Jennifer Lawrence in the screenplay or whatever, but I was even kind of surprised that John Hawkes got nominated because he doesn't have that much screen time. He's great, but
it just had a ton of critic love.
Yeah, it was number 2 on like the critics polls behind the Social Network.
But that movie, you would say that probably wouldn't have gotten in if there were 9 nominees.
No, I think that was number 10.
Not make the cut.
The only other movie that was contending here was The Town. Like, there wasn't a 12th movie, and The Town got PGA and Critics' Choice. When it comes down to it, The Town didn't get a screenplay nomination. It only got supporting actor, whereas Winter's Bone packaged it up real nice and got 4 nominations.
It's kind of weird that you say there's no 12th movie.
There just wasn't. Like, I searched far and wide, there just wasn't.
What about like Another Year?
It just wasn't getting picture nominations. Out of this 11, the Critics' Choice nominated everything except for The Kids Are All Right, which, makes me a little bit sad.
Who nominated The Kids Are Alright?
The PGA's 10 nominees included
and Golden
all
Globes
these
comedy.
10, but they didn't include Winter's Bone, which for the Producers Guild, they like indies less than the Oscars, so this kind of makes sense that Winter's Bone was left off there. The BAFTA nominees were King's Speech, Social Network, Black Swan, Inception, and True Grit.
Oh, they didn't nominate The Fighter?
The BAFTAs didn't like The Fighter that much. They only gave it 3 nominations. The Golden Globes drama category was King's Speech, Social Network, Black Swan, Inception, and The Fighter. This makes sense to me. This feels like the 5. But they fucking shut out True Grit. And there's not a reason for it. I looked up. I said, there must be a reason. There's not a reason.
They didn't even nominate Jeff Bridges?
They didn't nominate Jeff Bridges. They didn't nominate Haley Steinfeld. Like, they
Wow.
empty-handed. What the hell happened there? And then their comedy musical category was just a shit show. Like, this is still one of those years that you look at the Golden Globes and you're just like, the fuck are you guys doing? The fuck are you guys doing? Because their nominees were The Kids Are Alright, great, you know, that was great, and that won. Red, which was probably like...
Oh, yeah.
Which was weird, because that was actually, I think, the second highest, like, critically acclaimed movie on there.
But it was more of an action movie.
Yeah, it was
like a funny action movie.
Alice in Wonderland, which makes sense for them, just because. They nominated Burlesque, which was probably just very expected. And then the 5th was The Tourist, which was, first of all, just by no means a comedy. And the other thing was that it got panned by critics. So the only reason it got in is because they love Johnny Depp and they love Angelina Jolie.
They nominate them in comedy actor and actress.
So that got 3 fucking nominations. They just wanted to nominate them, and for some reason,
that's where like the whole thing with Golden Globes being obsessed with star power comes from.
You say, but what could have they nominated? You can look in the comedy actor categories and find a couple things they could have nominated. They could have nominated Barney's version, which Paul Giamatti won for. They could have nominated Easy A. Like, they just didn't nominate Easy A.
See, Golden Globes just hate actual comedies. Every now and then they don't. But a lot of times...
The Globes fucked up this year. That's it. One general trend that's kind of weird is Black Swan gets 12 BAFTA nominations, 12 Critics' Choice nominations, and only 5 Oscar nominations.
Shit. Did it get snubbed for a lot of
stuff? It was supposed to get, like, sound and makeup and costumes and production design.
Oh, it didn't get sound?
Best Director. This was considered an upset. King's Speech, if you look at the betting odds for the Oscar for Best Picture, it was actually expected to win Best Picture. People caught on. It was like, oh, it won the PGA and the BAFTA? Like, yeah. But they thought Fincher was winning because the only thing Fincher lost was the DGA.
But even the BAFTAs,
I know, that's
Tom
the
Hooper
thing.
is one of their own. And they did not give it to Tom Hooper.
King's Speech won 7 BAFTAs. They still had the sense to give it to David. I get if the King's Speech made you feel tingly and you wanted to vote for Best Picture, but, like, give David Fincher an Oscar, folks. You know?
Just gonna have to wait to see if he wins this year with Mank.
Then we had Darren Aronofsky in Black Swan. This is great that he gets in, and he gets in everywhere.
I could see that being an egregious snub, but there's actually another egregious snub in here.
David O. Russell, The Fighter, sort of half expected. He got DGA and Golden Globe.
I feel like The Fighter came out as like being sort of an underdog, but by the end it was like maybe even like number 3 most likely to win.
The Coens for True Grit, this was actually a bit of a surprise. They only got Critics' Choice. As we know, that's more than 5 slots. They didn't get DGA, they didn't get BAFTA, they didn't get Globes. And this is also a surprise because there was a slot in here that we thought was guaranteed for a certain someone. A certain someone named Christopher Nolan. Who got nominated everywhere. I mean, obviously.
And right after they expanded it into 10, second year, Nolan's film Inception gets in, but they do him dirty again, because they don't give him a director nomination.
You're referring to the Dark Knight snubbage.
Yeah.
Which was kind of the reason they expanded it to 10 in some ways. Like, how do you not acknowledge Christopher Nolan for this movie? Like, nobody else could have put together such a movie, and it was an instant classic. I don't understand it.
Yeah, and especially because it's considered a frontrunner for a while. And I can even understand this more than another snub that Inception got, which we'll get to. The 5 should have been Nolan over the Coen brothers, I would say.
And then Danny Boyle was kind of a possibility. He got Critics' Choice and BAFTA.
That would have been nice to see because he directed the shit out of that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that movie was like all his directing. Like, he made a movie where a guy was stuck into a freaking thrilling and gripping movie.
That just doesn't feel like a movie that would make it in 5 slots, which it, didn't really.
Sadly, because I think that was definitely in my top 5 of the year.
Maybe even 2.
I mean, there's a lot of really good movies in this lineup, I would say. Like,
yeah, for sure. This was a good year overall.
It was a good year overall, but oddly enough, there wasn't a lot of competition to get in. It just happened to be that the films that were getting in were really good.
Moving on to Best Actor. Colin Firth in The King's Speech, for as much hate as The King's Speech gets, nobody will deny Colin Firth his Oscar for this movie. I mean, who else are you going to give it to here? Like, Jesse Eisenberg and James Franco were really good, but they're not going to win an Oscar.
Either one of them would have deserved it. So Javier Bardem for Beautiful, that seems like an interesting one. Who was supposed to get in? Ryan Gosling for Blue Valentine?
Or Robert Duvall. It seemed like a coin toss. One of them got Golden Globe and Critics' Choice. One of them got Critics' Choice and SAG. He has a big beard in that movie.
Okay.
He's Robert Duvall, but Javier Bardem in Beautiful was kind of interesting because he only got the BAFTA nomination, and Gosling couldn't get in for Blue Valentine, even though his co-star Michelle Williams was nominated.
Blue Valentine's definitely the number 12.
I guess Blue Valentine could be number 12. Mark Wahlberg in The Fighter got just a Golden Globe nomination. There was a wacky-ass supporting cast, and Mark Wahlberg was like the straight man, so they couldn't really nominate him for the movie.
Yeah. But I could have seen, if they liked him enough, they could have pulled like a Bradley Cooper and American Sniper on him.
Best Actress. Like, this is just top-tier agreeableness. This is an incredible performance, and Natalie Portman needed an Oscar. She swept. Like, it was just unanimous. It was probably, when it premiered at the festivals, they were like, here it is. We know who's winning Best Actress now. If Natalie Portman didn't win, I would assume Annette Bening would win. After American Beauty, it was like, can Annette Bening win now? So every time
she also needs an Oscar.
Yeah, because she needs an Oscar.
She really needs an Oscar. And she won the Golden Globe for Comedy Actress.
But she also didn't have like the most screen time for a lead actress, and she sort of shared it with Julianne Moore. Jennifer Lawrence in Winter's Bone was nominated everywhere except for BAFTA. BAFTA was weird. BAFTA only got 2 of these. But her hype carried over from Sundance, and she was probably a large part of why Winter's Bone got in, because, you have a lead actor who's like stable in the category. Obviously, Jennifer Lawrence's like breakout movie and her first nomination. And Michelle Williams was nominated. She was probably the wobbly 5th slot here. Julianne Moore and The Kids Are Alright got the Comedy Golden Globe, obviously, and a BAFTA nomination, so she was sort of iffy. Like, she could have been double nominated. That would have made some sense.
They probably really thought they could get both in, so it's kind of disappointing they didn't.
Noomi Rapace and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo got Critics' Choice and BAFTA. And I don't think that she was very well known at the time, but obviously that book was a sensation, and even the Swedish movie got some traction.
It looks like the SAGs did something wacko.
Yep.
Hilary Swank in Conviction, a movie I haven't heard of.
This was like really one of her only nominations for this movie. Like, she just wasn't getting critics things. Like, it wasn't really happening. Supporting actor. Christian Bale in The Fighter. Swept almost everywhere.
Yeah, this is an interesting category because Christian Bale obviously like gave one of his best performances. It was so easy to give him this award for a supporting actor. Like, it was almost a no-brainer. But Jeffrey Rush in The King's Speech is really great. And in any other year, Jeffrey Rush would have had a second Oscar. You would think, watching that movie, that he and Colin Firth are walking away with Oscars. Yep. It's a cakewalk for both of them to the Oscars. But Christian Bale stepped in front of him and said no.
The Fighter didn't premiere at festivals, so we had a good, couple months where people were just comfortable with the fact that Jeffrey Rush was winning the Oscar. Jeffrey Rush won the BAFTA. This was just an example of the BAFTAs awarding their own. Like, they're celebrating the fact that they have the biggest contender, and they're just giving all the actors the awards. Screenplay, picture. They threw a whole King's Speech party. Mark Ruffalo and The Kids Are Alright. This just had to happen after seeing the movie. It was yeah. For some reason, the Golden Globes didn't nominate the guy. I don't know what the deal is with that. I don't like that. Jeremy Renner in The Town was considered the scene stealer of the movie, and he was the movie's only nomination. And John Hawkes in Winter's Bone. This is a surprising nomination. He did get the SAG, which was kind of weird because the guilds, the PGA didn't like Winter's Bone. It feels
extra surprising because who's next?
Andrew Garfield in The Social Network,
who got everything I'm seeing,
everything
every
except
significant
for SAG.
Thing. Oh, he didn't get SAG.
This 5 was actually matched perfectly with the SAG.
He definitely
it is sad that he didn't get nominated. Maybe there's a little bit of a bias towards young actors in a way. Yeah. It feels a little similar to what we'll see in the next category when Mila Kunis was missing. Anomalies. Michael Douglas in Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps. This was the role that he won an Oscar for the original Wall Street. This was the only place that nominated Michael Douglas for this movie. It was just the Golden Globes. Sam Rockwell in Conviction, that movie that Hilary Swank got a SAG for. He was actually getting some critics awards for this. Critics' Choice gave him a nomination. Pete Postlethwaite for The Town. He kind of took out Jeremy Renner at the BAFTA, but this was a posthumous nomination, so it seemed that the BAFTAs wanted to honor this man. Supporting actress. Melissa Leo in The Fighter. The narrative became Melissa Leo, late into her career. Oh, she got a Boston accent. She's smoking a cigarette all the time. So you have to give her an Oscar for doing that.
You're yeah, I know, I've seen that person before, and She's like aggressive and like makes you feel uncomfortable, but is also very like fierce and loyal. Like I remember that character from the movie. Like she's really good in the movie. It makes sense that she won all these awards, even though I think Amy Adams was almost like on her coattails for winning the award even.
And I think maybe Amy Adams even had more screen time too.
So it's interesting that she won for a movie where she kind of shared the screen time with Amy Adams.
And something we're seeing here that's very interesting, I think, is that Melissa Leo wasn't nominated at the BAFTAs.
Oh,
Not nominated. They nominated Amy Adams and not Melissa Leo.
Wow. And then they gave it to Helena Bonham Carter.
That makes sense, though.
You'd think it would have been Amy Adams for The Fighter, I think.
They wanted to give the King's Speech all the awards.
So. Okay, but Helena Bonham Carter is good in the King's Speech, and I get why she got nominated, but she wasn't like Oscar worthy in it. She was very much like a supportive wife who can like use her privilege and status like for the good. She was just charming and she was good, but she didn't need like an award for it. Nomination's good enough.
Haley Steinfeld gets nominated for True Grit. This is great. She was extremely young to get nominated.
But she wasn't supporting. It was category fraud.
It was category fraud, and the BAFTAs actually nominated her in lead. And then Jackie Weaver gets in. This is a little bit of a surprise. I'm sure she wasn't number 5. I'm sure Mila Kunis.
She surprised the Oscars again when she had nominated for Silver Linings Playbook.
But Mila Kunis in Black Swan gets everything but the BAFTA. She misses.
She even got the SAG. Wow.
It was all lined up
Very
for her.
similar to Andrew Garfield.
The BAFTA, though, like, what they did in their supporting actress category, they nominated Leslie Manville for another year, who was actually getting a lot of critics nominations. She was probably considered a possibility to show up on Oscar morning. Another reason Mila Kunis wasn't nominated is because they nominated the mom from Black Swan in supporting, which is kind of weird. It's like you're going to nominate her and not Mila Kunis. That's weird. Original screenplay. The King's Speech and The Social Network were divided in original and adapted. So it was kind of obvious. The King's Speech wins original, Social Network wins adapted. It wasn't eligible at the Writers Guild, and so it went to Inception, which was clearly like a number 2 for the mind-bendy, imaginative script that was.
It makes a lot of sense why the King's Speech won.
Yeah. You actually could have had it where every Best Picture nominee got nominated in screenplay because of the way that they were divided 5 and 5. That was expected to happen. But what happened instead? Black Swan is the fucking one to get snubbed. Excuse me. They did nominate Mike Leigh for another year, which is kind of an interesting pick. It wasn't nominated at the BAFTAs even. So that was a big surprise. And why didn't Black Swan get nominated? Why didn't that happen? Ridiculous.
I guess they saw it as more of like a directing achievement.
King's Speech in another year were not eligible at the Writers Guild, so they were kind of forced to find something else. And they picked Please Give, which is a Nicole Holofcener movie. And if you think about how they gave Can You Ever Forgive Me that award, you think like, oh, they just like Nicole Holofcener. And then adapted screenplay, obviously The Social Network wins. Like, this is a no-brainer.
That's like the screenplay of like the fucking century. It's the most screenplay out of any screenplay that I've ever seen. Yeah. Like, they're probably doing like 2 pages per minute, whereas like a normal script does 1 page per minute, just 'cause how fast they go through the dialogue.
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin's just a madman.
And I mean, there was such a good narrative for him to win that. Like, I think he was on set during The Social Network and like collaborating like heavily with David Fincher. He even made a cameo in his film, so
he's like an all-star writer, which is very rare.
It's like him and Charlie Kaufman are like the ones that come to mind. Besides writer-directors like Quentin Tarantino. But now him and Kaufman are both writer-directors, so look at how that happens.
This 5 makes sense because they were all nominated for Best Picture. It was probably like, oh, if The Town gets in, that's going to get screenplay, but if Winter's Bone gets in, then that will get screenplay. Cinematography. Inception wins this award, which I think is kind of interesting.
Kind of surprising.
Because it's not like a meticulously like framed, like crazy colored movie. Most of the lighting is like sort of what you expect, and it has a sort of shaky handheld style, which is obviously unique for a blockbuster.
I feel like it was almost like in a way a visual effects achievement, because think about the cinematography in the scene when the room is rotating. That is cinematography, that they're like moving around the room like this because the camera is doing like a lot.
But that was just the set turning around, so it was actually production design.
I understand, but the like to conceive of that whole shot.
Yeah.
And then also do it where the set's not just the thing that's turning, the camera is too.
I mean, I think that the handheld style that Christopher Nolan does with Wally Pfister is like pretty great. Bringing that to this type of blockbuster definitely is more immersive.
Maybe it was even the art direction that helped it get in. But also like the slow motion, I guess, is part of it. It was a very good looking movie, but to win is interesting. I think people were thinking True Grit was going to win this. If I remember correctly,
I think they were because Roger Deakins was overdue.
Yeah, Roger Deakins.
He came off the BAFTA. This was his third BAFTA win. And so he was still without an Oscar. And so people were saying, maybe now? But Inception won the Critics' Choice and the ASC, so that's hard to argue with.
The King's Speech, Black Swan both had really great cinematography.
Black Swan especially, I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And The Social Network, which I was surprised to find out, missed a nomination at Critics' Choice and BAFTA? Why didn't they nominate The Social Network for cinematography?
Yeah, that's kind of
what the
insane.
hell is that?
But it got a nomination at the Academy Awards, so that's all that matters. And then 127 Hours, that's really sad actually that missed out on a nomination. That movie's really well made and the cinematography is everything in it. It's like a fucking textbook of cinematography, what you can do with a camera that makes a movie interesting.
Yeah.
And elevates the material. Again, what would you have taken out here? It's a really stacked category.
Many people would say take out The King's Speech.
I wouldn't agree with that. There's some really beautiful shots in The King's Speech.
Yeah.
The King's Speech almost used wide-angle lenses like The Favorite did. If you're going to credit for anything, I think one of the things, even if you didn't like the movie, you'd have to credit it for the cinematography.
Although there are a lot of people who hate Tom Hooper's wide-angle shit, and they fucking hated it in Les Mis.
Okay, but it was different in this movie. It was used well.
Yeah, it was. And it has a weird uncomfortableness.
It made sense for the movie. The way they shot the church, the way they shot the places he was speaking, it really made sense they would shoot it that way.
The ASC is super fucking accurate. There are a lot of years where they go 5 out of 5 on ASC. Best editing. Here we're going to get into one of the most egregious tech snubs that you could imagine. But first, The Social Network won Best Editing. Makes a lot of sense. The montages, the precision.
When I watched the movie, I was like, "Oh God!"
I know.
I could run a play-by-play of this movie just to analyze why the cuts are coming in because they happen so fast, but they work really effectively. And you're like, if you break down the sequences in your head, they get more and more interesting. As the movie's flowing, you're not noticing the editing still. But it's always cutting between different things. It's really interesting.
This could contend for best editing of the decade. If there was gonna be such a category, it could maybe win that.
And this one won the Eddie, the BAFTA, the Oscar, but not the Critics' Choice. What won the Critics' Choice?
Inception.
Which makes sense because Inception, which I just watched, has phenomenal editing. It's actually similar to The Social Network. It moves at a breakneck pace. And it's never letting you go.
No, the editing in Inception is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And also, more obviously, how it cuts between each layer.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
If you get up to, get a drink of water for 30 seconds, you will miss something. Because that's how, efficient the editing is.
I mean, Inception also had, action scenes and everything that the Oscars seem to want in an editing nominee or winner.
Yeah,
what the hell was
disgusting.
that?
It's really disgusting. I could have accepted that Nolan didn't get nominated before I'd accepted the editing doesn't get nominated for this movie.
What is this? What is this?
What?
The Fighter even got nominated for editing, which is fine. But again, who voted for The Fighter over Inception?
And thank goodness that 127 Hours got nominated for editing here because that was nuts too. That was nuts.
Yeah.
They were doing split screens. They were doing a lot. And The King's Speech, you can't really go wrong there. You couldn't leave that one out.
Kind of interesting. True Grit didn't get nominated for editing anywhere, despite getting double-digit nominations at Critics' Choice. And
I think
Oscars.
it's because there's a really solid 6 here. Inception missing director and editing definitely made people be like, okay, this is not going to win.
Production design. This was one of the most surprising ones of the night.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure. Because Alice in Wonderland wins, but that's its only win. Inception was supposed to win.
Damn.
Of course Inception was supposed to win. The Dream World.
Yeah, there's so many weird things in the movie where you're looking at the background, you're like, that's not totally a place that I know of. I don't know where they are. They're in a garage thing, but it's okay. I can accept this because this is sort of a dream. It's very unspecific. I don't really need to know where I am right now.
Yeah, and the world of Limbo, the rotating hallway.
Oh, the elevator?
They even had a snowy Call of Duty winter map.
Well, that was dumb.
Yeah, but they had
so
this sort of variety. That room where Cillian Murphy confronts his father is just give the production design.
Oh, yeah. They had Space Odyssey imagery kind of. So that one won everywhere except for the Oscar.
I mean, obviously Alice in Wonderland had a shit ton of production design, but you'd think they would go with the movie that's using it for the greater good. But Harry Potter getting in over Black Swan is a little bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, it seems very random. Deathly Hallows Part 1. I'm actually kind of surprised that Black Swan got in everywhere except for the Oscar. To get nominated for production design as a contemporary film is very hard to do. But I guess it's part of the film's surrealism.
Costumes, Alice in Wonderland, wins everything, sweeps everywhere. There are actually some weird nominations here. Black Swan was supposed to get nominated. Ballet Suits, Big Feathers, not nominated.
Really?
That got nominated everywhere.
Oh, yet another Black Swan snub. This is getting really sad.
A couple weird nominations. The Tempest, and then I Am Love gets costumes. Not supposed to happen.
Yeah, so we would have been like kicking in the air in this category gets announced because Black Swan's not there and I Am Love.
Makeup and hair. This is pretty wacky. This has just got to be one of those years where they like fucked up on their short list and then fucked up like even further in the nominations. All of their nominees didn't have prior things. They didn't get BAFTA Critics' Choice. All three of these movies was their only nomination. Their shortlist did include True Grit and Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland was supposed to win. It won Critics' Choice and BAFTA, and it still got snubbed.
And Black Swan was not on the shortlist?
When you look at the shortlist, you go, oh, True Grit and The Fighter are on here. Maybe they'll put in a Best Picture nominee. No. Visual effects. Obvious no-brainer. Inception wins visual effects, and it swept everywhere. And Hereafter won the supporting VFX for a Big Wave. Big Wave got that movie Oscar nomination.
BAFTA nominated Toy Story 3. That's kind of interesting.
Tron Legacy was probably the biggest snub here. Score. The Social Network. Winning score.
Thank God.
Incredible. One of the best scores of the decade or all time. A score that kind of redefined movie scores because it was an electronic score. And it's like very influential. Like this score has left a mark.
And it has a great theme still. Like just because they're using electronic music doesn't mean they abandon that. Like there's that really somber piano melody they play over like that drone, and that's pretty iconic, I think.
Yeah, and it's like a little experimental too. Like there's like all kinds of wacky sounds and textures, and it's very dark. Timeless score.
Yeah, and then so I see that the King's Speech got the BAFTA, which I don't support that, having seen the movie. Oh God, it wasn't Social Network wasn't nominated
at the BAFTAs. What the hell is that? What the hell is that?
That's disgusting.
Traditionalists, staunch traditionalists. They think electronic music isn't music. We don't know what this is. We don't know what happened here. 127 Hours gets a score nomination. That's nice. And How to Train Your Dragon.
Alice in Wonderland snubbed, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, Alice in Wonderland
Black Swan. I didn't know that was like a score. Was that even a shortlisted thing? Since they have to use the theme from Swan Lake.
Yeah, that's why it was not eligible. The Oscars are like that. But Clint Mansell, I mean, he should have been nominated for it. True Grit was also not eligible. That might have been nominated too. Inception's score, I feel like, would win in another year where you're not competing against the Social Network. Sound editing and sound mixing. Inception won both awards. Like, this is easy, obvious, completely deserved. You know, not just because it has booms and bangs, but like, just the overall sound design in Inception is pretty incredible. True Grit gets both, and then they split on the bottom three. Sound editing nominates a couple action movies. Sound mixing nominates The Social Network and The King's Speech. Black Swan snubbed for both.
So this was back when people actually looked at mixing and editing as different. This year we had Joker in sound editing.
If you think about how now the sound categories are combined, like what would the five would have been? Inception, True Grit, like...
I think Social Network King's Speech would have been in there.
Yeah, but would they have room for those movies? Because they aren't sound effects movies. They're just well-mixed movies. Like, do they nominate those?
Yeah.
We'll have to see in the future. We don't know what the future holds anymore.
But Black Swan, for being a contender in both those categories and not getting nominated in any, is a pretty big deal.
It should have gotten sound mixing over Salt, which was out of nowhere. Salt wasn't supposed to get nominated. Animated feature, Toy Story 3 wins everywhere but the Annies. There's a whole thing about the Annies and Pixar because the Annies had like a huge amount of them are like working for DreamWorks or like employed by DreamWorks, so they vote for How to Train Your Dragon or whatever. And the third nominee was The Illusionist, French film, which they nominated over Despicable Me and Tangled, which is pretty
surprising.
Big. It's pretty big.
And this is when obviously animated branch was like full of people who were actually working in animation, and you couldn't just be a schmo and vote in the animated category, which now is the case. And if this were the case now, I'm sure Despicable Me would be there instead of The Illusionist.
Or Tangled. If they had 5, it would have been a no-brainer and put all these in. Song went to Toy Story 3. A big snub here was probably that nothing from Burlesque got in. 2 Burlesque songs were nominated at Golden Globes and one of them won. Foreign film went to In a Better World. And this was not really supposed to happen. Beautiful was the other nominee that was like nominated everywhere. In a Better World wasn't even nominated at Critics' Choice and BAFTA, but it won the Golden Globe. I wonder if Beautiful was expected to win, or if it was In a Better World.
In a Better World had a 65 on Metacritic,
Claim.
and Beautiful had a 58 on Metacritic. So if those were the frontrunners, it's kind of interesting.
But Beautiful was a Best Actor nominated movie too. You actually have a few movies here where the directors went on to become Oscar nominated or Oscar winners. Lanthimos, Iñárritu, and Villeneuve.
Oh, but Girl with the Dragon Tattoo would have been a top contender, but it didn't get nominated.
That's right. And I Am Love was supposed to get nominated too. And for whatever reason, I don't know what these countries are thinking, but those two movies weren't submitted by their countries. Why not? I Am Love gets nominated for costumes, but is not eligible here. Kind of interesting. You know, why couldn't something like that have happened to Portrait of a Lady on Fire? Who knows?
Dogtooth got nominated. That was a weird-ass movie.
Of Gods and Men was supposed to get nominated because that was nominated at the BAFTAs. And it was a huge, like, Cannes movie. Finally, SAG Ensemble. The King's Speech wins SAG Ensemble. It got 3 acting nominations. The Fighter was probably next in line to win, for obvious reasons. It won the Critics' Choice. They nominated The Social Network, The Kids Are Alright, and Black Swan. You'd think maybe True Grit would get nominated, but it did not.
Yeah, you definitely think True Grit would.
Or The Town, maybe.
The Town for, like, you know, having an ensemble. Black Swan, I wouldn't necessarily think would get in, but it's worthy, obviously. And The Social Network is kind of a shoo-in.
And kind of interesting that every nominee here is a Best Picture nominee. That doesn't always happen. Movies that did not get any nominations. Shutter Island got no nominations, which is a movie that is still enjoyed greatly by many to this day. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. There are probably many people who are upset that it got completely shut out by the Academy for being, you know, like a comic book comedy. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which ended up like getting nominations here or there at a lot of places, and yet nothing at the Oscars. Uncle Boomie. You love Uncle Boomie. That was nominated, obviously nominated for nothing. Like, no fucking way.
I hope you enjoyed this time travel machine as we took you back through the vortex of time travel into a past time that is no longer.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Did you like it when the king spoke?